thank you for joining us for the webinar on gamification of learning initiatives, 4 key aspects in planning in partnership with Change Inc. This is Bhumika from People Matters, and before moving to the agenda of the day, let me give you a brief of the topic. As gamification becomes a popular tool in ensuring interest for a variety of learners, the challenges that learning professionals are facing are around what important aspects one needs to take into account to ensure that interests remain high and learning happens seamlessly. The top takeaways from this webinar would be: first, learning design considerations; second, gamification parameters to drive adoption; third, building end-user excitement; and last, case study on adoption. Let me now introduce the speakers for this webinar. We have the privilege with us of having Tamal Bhatia, founder and CEO, Change Inc. Tamal heads Change Inc., an organization that brings gamification to the mainstream people functions. He has 17 years of experience in the learning space with over 10,000 hours on game-based learning and holds patents that run Change Inc. technology engines today. Next, we have Deepti. Deepti is the lead solution architect at Change Inc. Deepti drives the game engines for Change Inc. from a storyboard and engagement perspective. Her unique blend of experiences from teachforindia.org to Ma TV and a great interest in reading enable her to profile her audiences very well, leading to solid creation of the game structures and gamification motivation. Our partners today for the webinar is Change Inc. Change Inc. is a technology company that has gamification and game-based products that provide creative solutions for organizations across a wide variety of HR areas, including talent engagement, learning, and driving organizational values. With a SaaS model, Change Inc. drives convenience, accessibility, and usability for their clients through different offerings. Their platforms have been deployed across organizations like RBS, Cognizant, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, and Qualcomm, to name a few. We have saved time for you to ask your questions at the end of the webinar. For those attending live webinar, you can submit questions at any time during the presentation through the Q&A section. We will try to respond as many questions as time allows. We have an exciting topic to discuss in the webinar today, so without any further delay, let me invite Tamal to take over. Over to you, Tamal.
Thank you. People Matters. Thank you, Bhumika. Happy to be here. A very good afternoon to all of you. This is pretty much the third webinar of our series with People Matters on gamification, and a very large part of what we are doing and what we are sharing are driven from our own experiences in the space, which we are very happy to share with all of you. So at any point in time, please feel free to drop in as many questions as you can. Between Deepti and me, we will try and answer them on the webinar, and those that we can't, we will certainly send you a reply within a couple of days, right? So let me start. When we look at gamification, and gamification today continues to be an important buzzword as we are moving through scaling up and using technology for a wide variety of processes. So we are essentially, looking at what are the learning design considerations that one must take into account. And when we talk about learning design considerations, we're not only talking about it from an L&D perspective, but from what do you want the user to do, and we'll see more of that as we go by. What are the sort of parameters that drive adoption? So one of the biggest challenges is how do we ensure larger adoption depending on what we want. So what are the sort of parameters that drive adoption? Gamification works when end user is excited, and that's something that Deepti will be talking in greater length about. But primarily, how do we build that excitement? And we have a small case study at the end that we are going to share with you of what we have done and what have we learned and how does it pan out on a larger audience level, right? So let's jump pretty much right into what are the learning design considerations that we need to keep in mind. Very often we find that people say, oh, gamification, let's just do something. But the most important criteria around gamification is we have to start with the outcome. What is it that one wants to achieve through the gamification process is more important than saying gamification is running and it will work, because unless we are clear about the outcome. So the most important part remains, why do I need to gamify? What sort of outcomes do I have in mind, right? Why is the outcome important? So it has to connect in some way or the other to what the environment wants, what the organization wants, maybe what business wants. In many cases, what we are seeing is what. So the why is as important, and how will we execute something like this, right? So those are the key considerations that one must have in mind when one looks at the learning design. So if I have to say what's the outcome, the question really comes down to what do I want. And when I say I mean from an organization perspective, what do we really want? So some of the things that we constantly see and which are coming up, are, do I want adoption? So I have a lot of compliance related content that I would like people to have a look at. There is an entire policy of sexual harassment that needs to be consumed as a mandate, but nobody does, which is an adoption issue because it's lying somewhere and nobody really cares. So what do I really want? Do I really want, is adoption my key goal? Is one consideration. Is increased awareness, increased knowledge. So is my key goal, is my outcome knowledge? So do I need to see salespeople, operation folks, if I need to see the customer service folks know more about products and services, then that is a different kind of outcome that one is looking at. If we talk about saying, is my content meaningful? Am I running a useful experience that people are wanting to know more about or wanting to engage more with in? Then, feedback on content. Is it relevant? So is our content relevant to our audience and what can we do about it? And amongst other things, engagement. If we want to engage our employees, what do we want to engage them on? Do we want to engage them on values? Do we want to engage them on ethics? Is it culture? So what do we want to engage them on and how do we want to engage them are some of the outcomes that typically one needs to keep in mind. Do we want to be competitive? Do we want to be competitive? Do we have reward and recognition that we have in plan? Competition is a bit of a tricky one because those who are leading are anyway interested and those who are not might not be interested. So one needs to look at competition a little more carefully. So to sum up outcome, we must start with why do we want gamification? If you say I want gamification because I want adoption, I want engagement, I want competition, then you have a fairly clear picture of how you will need to gamify. If you just say, hey, I want gamification, you could be gamifying anything and you might not end up getting the results that you seek. So how do we answer the why? Why is it important to us? Why do we need the gamification, right? We need the gamification because it would typically enable us to do what? Will it enable us to scale up? Will it, am I today doing 50 people and tomorrow I need to do 500 people or 5,000 people? So how will this entire process help me? Is it that, we are today doing it at one knowledge center and at one level center and we need to take things organization wide? I have a mobile workforce, I have a distributed workforce, everybody has a phone, but I really don't know what to do and how to reach them. Then it is about widening the reach. So why are we doing this is as important. Building capabilities and capacity on scale is the other why that typically we tend to see, that I need to scale up across all kinds of people, all kinds of capabilities, but we do not have the reach. So a gamified platform helps us do that, right? So, it is important to go with the outcomes. And why is it important to essentially look at doing gamification? The place where we see significant drop, is typically in terms of how do people execute, how do you say that, hey, this is going to work in a seamless manner. And the effort is underestimated typically because one tends to say that somebody else is an expert and I'm only providing you with the audience. But one needs to be more invested in the execution, in terms of how will it be executed. And some of the typical things that one would look at definitely is pilot, starting from a pilot saying, hey, there is a small user group. Let us see what we learn from the small user group. And we use those experiences of what we learn into building up on a scale-up roadmap. So a pilot is an important consideration when we say how are we going to possibly go about doing this. And importantly, what are the numbers we are looking at? What sort of timelines? How will the deliverables work? Are metrics that are best thrashed out well before we enter the execution phase, so that you have a comparison and you can say we were intending to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, and as a consequence, where are we today and how are we doing? The execution on technology is relatively easier, but in terms of communication, in terms of making sure people are on a particular platform, those are challenges that need to be sort of creatively addressed, right? So if we look at what are the parameters to drive adoption, because primarily some of the things that one is seeking is to make sure that gamification is either bringing in a larger audience, is bringing in a larger efficiency, or is bringing in greater productivity, as we looked at from the learning design considerations. So if we look at the parameters that drive adoption, you need to have something that is engaging. Without engagement, it is very, very difficult to drive any form of adoption. There must be a social angle, and I think Deepthi will talk about it a little later, but primarily we need to see a socialization that is taking place so that people are able to talk about what they are doing and why it's important. We would ideally want it to be habit forming. Gamification parameters should be habit forming so that people say, hey, I don't mind spending 5 minutes doing this, 10 minutes doing this. There needs to be a reason why I am here and it makes sense to be here. So engagement, socialization, habit formation are 3 key criteria, and what they are doing is useful in some way. If we are not able to address, in our opinion, at least 2 of these aspects in adoption tends to fail. Because if we are going to say we are only doing engagement, there are many ways of doing engagement, and there are wide ways in which it can be done. But if you are doing engagement and usefulness, or engagement and habit formation, or socialization and habit formation, what really does tend to happen is that you get a larger footprint of people who are going to look at adoption. So these are some of the core parameters that drive adoption, right? And let's see how they pan out. So what are the aspects of engagement that one looks at from gamification standpoint, right? Interactivity being a key criteria, saying how much can we do things with them that allows them to interact with whatever we are creating. So if the content is there, how are we creating content that is interactive, or content with which they are able to play, express, and do things at a particular point in time. If we are saying we want them to essentially say, you're saying the faster you do it, the better it is, the more you are going to be quick, there is going to be gamification, there is going to be reward. So speed remains an important area of engagement where people feel, I need to do it because I need to be up there. So speed calls out to people significantly. Accuracy is another engagement area that drives the gamification in a significant manner, primarily because people like to be correct. People like to be right. People like to say that, you know what, on that particular quiz or on that particular piece, I am some form of a subject matter expertise. It matters to them that there is something that has accuracy associated with it, and that is something that calls out to people from an engagement standpoint. Then we have competition. I touched about it briefly earlier, but in any scenario, in any game, in any team, you always have people who like to say, I am a little ahead than somebody else. How that competition element plays out in your engagement is something that is a function of design. So a sales environment tends to be very competitive versus absorption environment like maybe process and process learning or induction and stuff like that need not be as competitive. So it's a function of how we want to do things. The socialization in order to drive adoption are taken almost entirely from the today's social media and the aspects that go in there. Sharing is an important part. Can I share either my achievement or can I share a thought? Can I share an image? What can I share that allows me to express my being part of a particular system? So sharing, rating as in I like, I dislike, or I am rating your performance being a 4/5 or a 4/7 depending on what sort of scale one chooses to use, and inviting others to participate or inviting others to view what one has done. So if you look at the socialization is essentially driven by saying, can I build credibility? Can I build adoption by getting people to talk more about what they are doing? It might be subtle, like rate me, or it might be sharing, saying how great I am and how well I'm doing. Or it might be saying, you know what, I think this is cool and you need to be part of this coolness as well. So socialization is, I think, going to be the thing that is really going to drive the future of gamification, because by definition, games are something that are social. So gamification uses game mechanics and hence it's going to be important. Habit formation, possibly in our view, the most challenging part of gamification, because what you do there and what you put out there needs to be something that really hooks people, that pulls people in there, and that is the criticality. Habit formation is about how relevant your content context is. So if you are providing learning content, if you are providing context, 45 minutes audio video, 45 minutes long webinar, sometimes just don't cut it. Habit formation is about simple small things that people can use at some point in time. So when people visit you, you should be able to provide them something of that they keep coming because it is convenient, it is easy, and it is relevant. There has to be a certain kind of novelty for it to be. So when I'm coming, I need to know that there is something new I can do. There is something that I get to talk about. There is something that I could possibly, get to know more, get to know new. And that says, hey, there is something new to do here. Say there is a small new piece of content that somebody says is useful. There is something about the organization value here and how it is used that is useful. So one needs to look at novelty as well from a habit formation point of view. When we talk about usefulness, we certainly need to find parameters that allow your participants to provide some form of feedback, so that you can tell them feedback is important for them to be able to give relevance rating to what they are doing. These are important aspects, because otherwise in content spaces it becomes very difficult to understand whether our content is relevant or useful, and what do we have in terms of being able to do that, right? So if we look at the core parameters and we talk about engagement, socialization, habit formation, and usefulness, each has a play. Would you be able to say that each should contribute 25%? Unlikely. But if you say my outcome is X, then you will be able to say which are the parameters that are possibly going to talk to you about your outcome in a larger manner. I'm going to hand the mic over to Deepti, and Deepti, with her experience in creating end user excitement is going to take us through the next segment.
Thank you, Tamal. So I'm going to be talking about the user experience. Building the user experience is really, really important because once you get your audience hooked on to whatever it is that you want to dish out, whether it is content in the form of a game or whether it is a PPT that you want them to consume or values like of the organization, as long as people are excited about getting there and you manage to reel them in, then half of your job is done. So this essentially happens in, has three different aspects of it, which we are going to go through. And it's usually cyclical how it happens. So the first part of it being a trigger, and the trigger leading to an action, and the action leading to a reward, and so on and so forth. We are going to see how each one of these, actually plays out and what it means. To just give you a simple example from daily life, let's assume you want to start a habit like Tamal has been talking about how each of these apps or the platforms that we want to have should become habit forming. And if we want to create a simple habit, even if it is like brushing your teeth after dinner, and how this would pan out in terms of a trigger, action, and reward. So when you have your dinner and you finish your dinner, that would be the trigger to the action, which is to brush your teeth. And the reward would be for you to feel happy about doing it or ticking it off your list, or the freshness in your mouth, depends, because what I was trying to get at is also that triggers are really different for different sets of people. Not all of us will follow, even with the example that I mentioned earlier, to be able to brush your teeth after dinner. Not all of us would do it for the same reason. And most of the triggers are usually motivated by a lot of intrinsic emotion. And the intrinsic emotions could be different for different people, which could include, whether it is social or unpredictability, or it could be any emotion that is, if you look at examples like, let's say when you go on to the apps that we are really used to, let's say Candy Crush or Facebook or even WhatsApp, when do we really get into it and when do we really engage in it? So one of the things that we see is when we are bored, when we are waiting in queue for something, you're in transit or you're frustrated sometimes because you're lonely. Unfortunately, we notice that most of the times these are negative emotions that drive us towards doing something because we are looking to fill a particular need. Sometimes the need in case of, the platforms that I mentioned, let's say I want to create something really interesting for my home. I want to do a DIY project and I need ideas. So, maybe the platform I go on to is Pinterest. So that's my trigger and I have a need and I want to make this on my own. Or if it is Facebook, similarly, I want to find out what other people are doing, or I want to showcase something that I have done, or I want to see the number of likes I got on something that I have displayed. So that becomes, if you have a trigger which is an intrinsic emotion and also solves the need, then it becomes really powerful. And also when it is a lot more inviting for you to take action. It becomes inviting when the action is really, really simple. And it's really easy for you to do, because in terms of ability and effort, if it is really low and the motivation is really high, that is when things tend to become habits. In case of the examples that I have already mentioned, for example, you have a notification on your phone, that becomes your trigger, and you sometimes pause doing something really important to just go ahead and check it, because it takes no time at all, and it requires really no ability from you. At the most of these platforms expect you to just log on or open a particular app, or in case of Pinterest, sometimes the action is so low, it just expects you to simply scroll. And by scrolling, you get like really a plethora of ideas are displayed, and every time maybe you may not like 4 out of 5 of them, but you're bound to find something that you really like, and it is rewarding an experience, and you can keep doing this endlessly. And this brings us to the reward part of it. Like I was talking, if the reward is the same thing that you get every time, let's assume in Pinterest you know the number of ideas they are, then you are not likely to keep looking at it over and over again. So variations or variable rewards are really important, because the unexpected is what excites the mind. It is one of the things that keeps us engaged. Think about it like a surprise party that you've ever been to, and somebody brings anything surprising, you're more likely to give that person brownie points as versus a regular situation, because we don't know what is coming, and so we are excited about it, and that variation is what is exciting to the mind and rewards us. So if this variation exists, also it ties us to the intrinsic motivation that we started off with, then the entire experience becomes more like a habit for us. So to quickly look at this in a potential learning scenario, the triggers, let's assume we have a learning module on a specific skill set, let's say written communication, and you want to get better at it, and this particular module is available to you. So different people might log on to this for different things. Maybe I want to be the best writer in my company, or I want to be the person who's able to finish his writing pieces really quickly, or I want to be known for my writing skills. So each one of us could be having different triggers, and most of us would move from that space into the action of actually opening the app and consuming the content that is available to us. And based on our triggers, the rewards are relevant to us. So if I want to be the best, then maybe the leaderboard is the most motivating factor for me, as versus if I want to be known for this skill, then people praising me or people recognizing me, or maybe my increasing knowledge of it is what gets me there. So just to wrap it up, this is how building user experience really looks like. I'm sure if you guys think about the apps or the games that you have as favorites, you will also be able to break it down into trigger, action, and reward. So now I'm going to hand it over to Tamal to take you through the case study that we have.
Hello. Yeah, hey. So I think as Deepti aptly pointed out, the most important parts of gamification remain that when we think about, so as users or as facilitators of people functions, we tend to have a view of saying we have seen it and we have known it. But unfortunately, typically from a design perspective, the action is something that is universal. We want everybody either to consume the content, we want them to attend the class, we want them to attend the program, and the rewards are also well defined. The areas where one needs to spend some time and thought, and I think Deepti has talked about it a fair bit, is the number of triggers that we choose to put out there. So the more we are going to be triggering, because one trigger fits all is just not possible. Tomorrow if we say, you know what, everybody is motivated by wanting to be known as being great, I don't think it is true of any system. If you take 15 people, you will find that maybe 3 people are motivated or triggered by being great, but the rest of the people perhaps are driven by saying, I would like to consistently be known for delivering this particular skill well. So these are completely different things, and one needs to take them into account, right? What we are now going to do is we're going to share a small case with you that is live and something that we have been running. And, it started with being a 5-week nano learning stream on a competency which went across about 1,200 people. And every week we were getting the responses to the particular parameters that they would like to build and how are people doing and what is happening. So it was just relevant to see sort of what are the results that we have got on that and how are we possibly going to build on. So the important part is gamification gives you some fairly real-time, quick-time, instant results to work on, right? So just so that you know, this is also currently running live and we are looking at different aspects of how this can be made better. So essentially, when we look at the statistics, we were looking at what are the login percentages we have, how many people have attended a particular stream, how many people have attempted at least 20 questions, at least 50 questions, what was the answer to question serve ratio. So there is a wide variety of data that can be culled from a technology engine. This is at a very high level something we thought we should look at and share with all of you. Right. So we were primarily saying, hey, what are the login percentages and how are we able to track these percentages? And so we were having login percentages as high as 60% over the 5-week period. So 60% login at a 5-week period on device is a significantly high number, and that's something that definitely excited us in terms of the power of gamification and the power of platform on mobile. We had 60% of people at least attempting a single stream of the total 5 streams that were presented to them. In terms of that, we had at least 25% of the people attempting 20 questions, out of a total of 60 questions that we had. You had 10% of people attempting at least 50 questions, and the answer to question serve ratio was a whopping 77%. Now, that is a number that is significant because that tells you we ran the experiment with the first part of the exercise not having any triggers and the second part of the exercise on having a wide variety of triggers. And the aspect that Deepti was talking about, as soon as we started triggering, the answer to question ratio started going up significantly. So triggers form an important part, and triggers is possibly one of the areas where one needs to spend a significant amount of time in possibly understanding how the entire adoption is going to work. So some of the things we saw, the engagement streams, the engagement streams initially were doing well, then the engagement streams started coming down, and we found a larger variance on a few days. So we found some days being better, some days not being so good. So one of the learnings that, this entire sort of data put out with us is that some things cannot be extended beyond a particular point in time. We should not run something just because we have designed it and conceptualized it and it needs to run. The data is telling us something and we need to recognize that data and use it meaningfully, right? So the top recommendations that, we had and then we implemented, and we are continuing to be a work in progress in that area, are, I think we've lost the presentation. So anyway, the last few things that we wanted to talk about is the recommendations. And primarily we are looking at saying that if you are looking at a post-program stream, it should ideally not be more than a couple of weeks in running the entire series. Daily 2 to 4 questions a day typically gives higher adoption rates. Friday and Monday are things that can ideally be avoided, and content that has not too much audio, video or case studies has a better adoption rate. Case study adoption tends to be the poorest, and if we are using triggers, we are able to run a significantly better adoption. So triggers is one of the key to adoption. And if we are going to do real-time incentivization, then we are likely to get more people to adopt. And these were some of the things that we were typically able to look at from our recommendation standpoint. So with that, we come to an end of our presentation, and would be happy to take questions.
Okay, great. I have the question with me from one of our listeners. What he wants to know is, how do you balance out fun and competition while designing a gamification framework?
So one of the ways in which we seek to balance out the fun and competition parts in the framework really is that if people are not going to have fun at a base level, they are not really going to be engaged with the process. And if you have so one needs to go back to the outcome, and you say that people need to be engaged with what are the various hooks that we are going to engage them with. If you keep too high a level of competition, what tends to happen is the guys who are at the top of the pack anyway are going to perform, and they are going to take away, you're going to alienate the rest. So the balance really lies in saying, is my outcome driven by only a sense of competition, or is my outcome driven by saying I want more people to sort of adopt and do what we are presenting?
Yes, absolutely. So so I think I hope this clarifies. Next we move on to our next question. while designing any gamification module, or while getting into gamification of something, do we really need to keep a tab on generation gaps of the employees, or a gap probably in the generation of employee group?
So that's a question that we get a lot, and because we have workforces with a wide variety of backgrounds. But it really comes back to the hook and triggers that we want to build in. So your hook and triggers could be for the older people around, saying you are subject matter experts and you need to build people and drive people and share your learnings with people. But if the younger audience are all about, can we be number one and can we be number two and can we be number three? So the challenge is always going to be a design which is as much encompassing as possible, but the reality is we will not be able to achieve that. If you say I'm going to try and catch everybody, I am not, but you definitely should think about your design from a perspective that if I have 90% millennials and 10% the generation X, what we are going to be driving is to say that a larger number of triggers are going to be for the millennials. And that's going to be a part of the design. Back to you, Bhumika.
Right. Thanks, Amal. I have my next question with me. It says that on what basis was the engagement stream calculated?
Right. So the engagement stream is primarily a function of the number of people on the platform with the number of questions served. So if we say that the engagement stream required us to, a total rollout was 100 people, and we had 60% of the people answering a minimum of 2 streams of questions. So then that is the engagement stream calculation. So engagement stream calculation could be extreme, meaning it could be deeply Puritan, or it could be saying I am looking at an entire serving and an entire population. Of that, how many people are responding to me? So if you say I am looking at engagement as everybody responding to everything, then that is definitely not going to be a particularly high level. But if you say I have X number of people who have constantly been on the platform and spent so much time, that would be a more realistic metric on engagement stream.
Right, Kamal. So, our next 2 questions are basically linked to each other. They are both from learning and development sphere. What it says is, first question is, can you tell us a few areas in learning and development where gamification has been implemented? Also, our next listener wants to know, he just wants to know about, more about gamification in the learning and development area.
Sure. So I think we'll tag both together, Bhumika, thanks. And we are today looking at gamification from the L&D space of saying that there are a wide variety of engagements that the L&D space interacts in, from classroom sessions to e-learning to a wide variety of modules that go towards development. We have ourselves launched and run gamification on 2 aspects. Aspect number 1 of saying how have people moved in a structured environment over 8 weeks and 8 sessions, and seeing what is their progression over a gamification engine. That is one area. So you have session after session after session, and that session then is either awareness tested, knowledge tested, or socialization tested. And the other area where we are having this ongoing project clearly is around a competency of collaboration and teamwork, where they want to test how much people are still aware of what is required post-program. So we have created an entire content stream that is being shared, in which people are on a daily basis answering a few questions which are leading to the gamification parameters, which include socialization, which include feedback, in fact. And we are looking at saying how can this then be used to create a scale model. So So these are the areas in which in L&D today we are looking at gamification being implemented. Over time, I think there are a wide variety of actions of L&D that will be gamifiable. It's just a function of what sort of a platform one chooses to use. The largest challenges that we see organizations also facing is there is so much technology available, and very often technology does not talk to technology. So how do you get over that? Yeah, over to you. Back to you, Bhumika. Thank you for the question.
Right. So our next question, Tamal, that I would be giving to you is, what is a real-time incentivization? Real-time incentivization.
Right. So that is actually today we are seeing as one of the most exciting areas of reward and recognition that you could possibly look at. So if you look at real-time incentivization, your gamification scoreboard moves literally every second depending on the size of your participant base. So you could say that you could popularize and say, for this week, the top scorer on accuracy, or you could get it down to this day. If you don't want this day, you could get it down to this half an hour. The people who, so if I want adoption, I could put out a trigger which says, whoever scores the maximum amount of accuracy points on the scoreboard over the next 2 hours is going to get rewarded. I'm not getting into what the reward is. The reward could be a free lunch and the reward could be anything. But that is the nature of real-time information that one could be getting and one could be monitoring to incentivize people. I hope that answers. That's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, that absolutely is. I have another very interesting question with me. It says, where do you think does gamification influence has more impact on a participant, on a skill, or on a competency?
Well, that is a million-dollar question. I wish I could say that we have cracked it and we have an answer to that. But I'll try and give as much of a perspective as I can. Right? I think gamification as a mechanism has a lot to play, or slightly more to possibly play on the skill side, because skill typically has more content-based learning on it, versus competency has more demonstratable aspects linked to it. So most engines would be more comfortable with skill as an accumulation of skill, as gamifying skill as opposed to gamifying competency. But I think in time the need is going to be competency, and as an organization we are building a framework where the social parts are driven by competency and not only by accumulation of information. But at this point in time, I think skill has its nose a little ahead, but probably in a couple of years, competency is going to gain larger ramification and use of gamification itself. Great question, thank you.
Yeah, so skill it is for now, and I think now due to the paucity of time, we have moved to our last question, which is, what are the potential risks of gamification? Does it create a sense of unrealistic expectations when incentivization is involved?
So yes, gamification is certainly not a cure to everything and anything that one needs to do. I think the stereotyping in gamification today is running on saying, I'm running a gamification, it should work. Because I think people don't invest enough time on the outcome, and nor do they invest enough time in saying, is either my content interesting or what I'm trying to say is interesting. We have people who say, you know what, we have modules which are 30 minutes. And when we tell them 30 minutes, the average time that a user is willing to look at something is 90 seconds. From 90 seconds to 30 minutes, you just assume that if gamification is there, it will work. No, that is a big pitfall. It is certainly not something that you can say, I'm gamifying so it should work. one needs to certainly put in a larger thought into outcome, parameters, mechanisms, triggers, everything that we have talked about. Two is gamification is never going to be catch-all. The experience that we are seeing today is where adoptions have been in the low double digits, 11%, 12%, and so on. You can definitely expect gamification to take it to anywhere in the 30-35% ranges. But most importantly, if you do it very well and if your triggers are really good, you could possibly take it all the way up to 45-50%. But that's probably it. You're not going to get everybody, and that is possibly the reality of how people view things and how things can be done. Thank you. Good question. Thank you, Bhumika.
Yeah, so Tamal, this topic is really very interesting. I have one more question with me, which is, can we use gamification in technical training? If yes, what is the way?
I see that the question is from Shraddha. Thanks, Shraddha. We don't very often get that. But yes, gamification can be used certainly in technical training, and we are actually currently working on a model. But just to share a brief idea of how gamification works in technical training is, content and context of technical training is entirely different from, say, soft skills and soft skill competencies. So your content, like I said, needs to be should be gamifiable. And for that, if you have large pieces of content, you first start with breaking it down into consumable pieces. You have to break it down into 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So there is a wide variety. Can it be done? Certainly. There is absolutely no reason, because the game mechanics of whether I'm doing technical training or I'm doing behavioral training are pretty much the same. It certainly can be done. The content challenge in technical training is larger because the pieces of content, the kind of content tend to be larger, requiring more immersion from the participant, more usership from the participant. But yes, can be done. Happy to talk. Maybe we'll drop you a line and we can see if we can be of any help to you.
Right. So with this, I think we come to the end of our today's webinar, and I would really like to thank our webinar partner, Change Inc., and our special thanks to Tamal and Deepti for this webinar and invaluable information that they have shared with us today. I would also like to thank everybody in the webinar audience for participating in today's presentation. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for many more such exciting sessions with People Matters.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to hearing from any of you at any point in time. Thank you for listening to us patiently. Thank you, People Matters. We look forward to many more.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Bhumika.
Thank you, Deepti. Bye-bye.